Okay, so I'm going outside my Atari comfort zone to play some ColecoVision Homebrew games. Now I understand that the ColecoVision has similar hardware to the MSX and the Sega SG-1000. So I'm pretty sure that many of these games are conversions, but I'm not really sure which ones are. Also, I think some of these are PAL games, so I slowed some of them down that I thought were too fast. That being said, let's dive in to some ColecoVision Homebrews. Let's start with this game called Aerial, and it's your basic flying shooter, kind of like Scramble or Super Cobra, and you just shoot the airplanes that are coming in, and you shoot the turrets that are on the ground, and it's a pretty nice little game. It seems like it just goes on and on forever. The music is a little annoying, but not too bad. I like how when you move up and down, your plane will fire either at the ground or in the sky, depending on which direction that you're pointing. Thought that was kind of a neat little feature, but overall a pretty good effort for a homebrew game. Next, let's take a look at Arno Dash, which is a Boulder Dash clone. Now, I've had my dealings with Boulder Dash in the past, and for some reason I enjoyed this game more than some other Boulder Dash versions. I'm not really sure why. The graphics are a little bit monochrome. They're mostly green and gray, but at least they're detailed. There's no music, and that's fine. I'm happy not having music annoying me while I'm trying to play my game. And if you haven't seen Boulder Dash, basically all you have to do is collect the diamonds and avoid the boulders crashing down on you, and then find the exit. It's a pretty simple game, and I feel like this version is pretty good. Alright, let's take a look at a game called Astrostorm, which is pretty clearly an asteroids clone. The asteroids themselves move and look properly, which is good. Although your ship is a little bit weird in the way that it moves. It doesn't seem all that smooth when moving forwards, but the turning left to right is pretty smooth. Also, you shoot dashes instead of dots, which is, it's okay, I guess. I thought maybe I was shooting missiles instead of photon torpedoes. Also like that there's color in the asteroids, that's nice. But overall, I'd say this is a pretty good effort. Alright, here's one called Battlot. I have no idea what Battlot means. Battle, a lot of battles, maybe? But it's pretty simple. You just make your way to the enemy base and destroy it. Of course, the enemy soldiers aren't going to let you just march right in and destroy their base. They're going to defend their base and try to destroy your base too. I had a little bit of trouble moving around, and I'm going to blame that on the fact that I'm using the Xbox 360 controller for this. It might actually be worse if you were playing with a real ColecoVision controller, but the timing trying to move down these hallways was a little bit challenging. I'd always overshoot it just a little bit, then I'd have to go back and try again. The graphics are a little bit plain, but that's fine. I'm more interested in the gameplay anyways, and this one was pretty fun. I actually enjoyed going up there and trashing their base. I could see where this would be a really fun two-player game. Alright, here's one you've no doubt heard of, Bejewled, which is a puzzle matching game. You just swap two gems, and if you get three in a row, they disappear. And it's pretty cool when you can do chain reactions. The graphics look pretty good. I mean, they're not super detailed or anything like that on the actual jewels, but I like having so much color on the screen. That's awesome. There's not much in the way of sounds, and there's no music, but that's fine. But my biggest problem with the game is that the controls, I don't know, they just don't make sense. It seems like you have to select a piece and then quickly switch to the other one that you want to swap with. I would just like to click it slowly, move to the piece that I want to swap it with, and hit the button again and have it do it, but it doesn't seem like it works that way. And at first I thought maybe I had the rapid fire enabled on the controller, but I didn't. It was just normal. So I guess that's just how this game is. But aside from that, it seems like a pretty competent version of Bejewled. Alright, next we have Bomb Jack, and this is a pretty well-known, I think, arcade game. It appeared on the NES, and basically all you have to do here is collect all the bombs and avoid the enemies. And if you can collect the bomb that is currently about to explode, then you get extra points. And to me, the appeal of this game is really the backgrounds. I enjoy seeing the different places that we can go, a bunch of interesting historical landmarks. I guess that makes sense though. You're trying to avoid these wonderful places being destroyed by bombs. The music in this game is a little bit irritating, but if you want, you can just turn the volume down. Would be nice to have an option where there's no music though. But the control is good, and the graphics are good, and the sounds are good. This is a really competent version of Bomb Jack. Alright, here's a game called Booming Boy, and it's kind of a Bomberman style game, but instead of bombs, it looks like you're placing musical bombs, I guess. I'm not really sure. Musical sound things or what are generators or something like that. And your goal is to destroy these green, well, it looks like a green centipede kinda. But it kinda has an underwater theme, which is kinda cool. I like that. The graphics are nice. Unfortunately, the music is not too annoying. I'm not the world's biggest Bomberman fan, but I do appreciate having a game that puts a different spin on Bomberman. So I've really enjoyed this game. Okay, here's a game called Bootskell. It's kind of an odd name, but essentially this is a Pengo style game where you push the blocks around and try to destroy the enemies. The graphics are a little bit plain and the music is a little bit annoying, but the gameplay is good enough to make me want to keep playing it for quite a while. I don't know if this has a two-player option, but I could see where it'd be a lot of fun to play two players and try to smash your friends against the blocks. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, Bootskell was a pretty fun little game. Our next game is Boxxle, which I thought only appeared on the Game Boy as Boxxle. Everywhere else, I think it's called Sokoban, if I'm not mistaken. This is kind of a well-known box pushing game with puzzle elements to it. You just have to get the boxes on those little dots there. And as you know, I'm not too bright, so trying to get past level 2, I couldn't figure it out. But hey, this seems like a very competent version of Boxxle, if you enjoy that game. Our next game is called Cavit. I'm sorry, but I couldn't help but think of Dick Cavett because I remember the Dick Cavett show from back in the day. I'm old. But this is basically a spin on Dig Dug or Mr. Do, and all you have to do is dig in the ground and collect the treasure boxes. Of course, there's going to be enemies between you and the treasure boxes, so you have to take them out somehow. And I think the only way to do that is to use the boulders and crush them. The graphics are kind of plain, much like the previous game Bootskell that we played, obviously done by the same developer. I mean, it even has the same music. But I rather enjoyed this game. It was pretty cool. Alright, our next game is called Champion Pro Wrestling, and I went into this game having really high hopes, but it looks way better than it plays. So yeah, the graphics are good and the sounds are pretty decent, I guess, but the problem with this game is the way that you play it. Instead of moving the joystick in a certain way and pressing a button to do a move, you press the button to select your move down in the bottom there, and then press the other button to actually perform that move. Maybe they did this because they had a lot of moves and they couldn't figure out how to do multiple button presses. I don't know. But it's really a shame because the way this game looks, it could have been fun, but the fact that you have to literally select your move, it really just ruins it. Here's an amazing one called Children of the Night, and of course I immediately thought that this was going to be a Castlevania clone, but it is not at all. In fact, it feels much more like a Zelda game, where you play as Dracula, making his way through this maze and shooting enemies along the way. As you can see, the graphics are just amazing, and the music and the sound effects are fantastic too. So basically, the goal is to, again, travel through the mazes, and you have to find these gems so that you can open up the doors so that you can move to the next part of the game. And ultimately, I think what you're trying to do as Dracula is to escape from the maze because the townspeople are coming after you, I guess. Well, it looks like there's demons and stuff in here too. But honestly, I really don't care about what the story is. I just find this to be a really fantastic and fun game to play. Alright, next we have Circus Charlie, and this is a conversion of an arcade game of the same name. And basically you are a clown riding a lion, jumping over fire through hoops of fire, trying to get to the end of the stage. And once you finish the hoop stage, then you got to jump over these monkeys, and that was about as far as I could get, because I suck at this game. And the graphics are appropriate, they look just like the arcade game as far as I can tell, and the sounds and the music are good, they don't annoy me too much, which is nice. So I would say this is a good conversion of Circus Charlie. Alright, here's a weird one called Cold Blood, and it's kind of a Pac-Man game mixed with like Metal Gear. I think. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. I saw these pals here and I thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to eat the pals and then eat the ghosts just like in Pac-Man, but no, that's not at all what you do. Those pals just give you special powers to allow you to continue the game. And really what you need to do is just escape out those side tunnels to go to a different part of the game. And there appears to be a lot of different mazes here to traverse, but this was an interesting game. It's got some nice graphics and some good sounds and some interesting animations and a weird storyline, but hey, I appreciate different takes on Pac-Man. Alright, our next game is a take on Commando called Commando Returns, and I get the feeling that this is more of a proof of concept than a complete game. I think the best part about the game is the music. It sounds pretty much like the arcade. And the graphics are pretty decent, and up until you get to the end part here where there's no graphics at all. Also, I realized that I couldn't be killed, so further proof that this is not a completed game. But hey, it looks pretty good, and it feels like it could make for a really good game in the future. Alright, here is a Pac-Man clone called Dacman instead of Pac-Man. I guess if you turn a D upside down and flip it, it's a P. Pac-Man? I don't know. This one I kind of had high hopes for. The graphics look pretty darn arcade accurate, and the sounds are really good too. But as you can see, the way that the ghosts move and Pac-Man moves, they move in steps kind of along the dots. And I can understand how they would do something like this and why. And I guess it's just easier to make the game like this versus having, you know, sprites. You're just using like background tile characters, I guess. But honestly, I really didn't care for this style of game. Our next game is called Danger Tower, and it's extremely simple. Just move around and don't get hit. Unfortunately, you can't shoot or attack or anything like that on these enemies that are moving around. The only thing you can do is just avoid them. It does get a little bit more challenging in the later levels though. But the graphics are pretty cool. I like the kind of 3D-esque look to them and the shading on the blocks there. That's kind of neat. And the sounds can get a little annoying, but not too bad. And I like that the main character is multicolored with big blue hair. Looks pretty funny. Anyway, Danger Tower is a pretty good little game. Alright, next we have what I consider to be kind of a famous arcade game because of how basic it is. It's Flicky. To me, Flicky is well known because it is the smallest Sega Genesis game at only 128 kilobytes. But basically, in this game, your goal is to collect all the little chicks and bring them back to the top area where it says the word Flicky, and that's kind of like their escape hatch. All the while, you're being chased by these cats who want to eat your little chicks. And for a Flicky game, I guess the graphics are okay. What I liked about it is how smooth the scrolling was, and the control isn't bad except for one slight problem. It seems like the platforms are just slightly too close together because I kept bumping into them all the time. So it made it much more challenging to get up there to my exit than it should have been, I think. But hey, if you like Flicky, it's on the ColecoVision. Here's a game called Flipper, and this is a pinball game, very obviously, which I found to be pretty enjoyable. The graphics are not, you know, spectacular. I mean, they're there and they work. There's really not much in the way of music, and the ball is a little janky when it moves around. It's not smooth. But despite all that, I still kind of had fun with this game. I really like how you have multiple flippers up in that top section there. It's almost like having two games in one. Alright, next we have Frontline, which is an arcade game. Kind of the precursor to Commando and Ikari Warriors. But this game is pretty good. I mean, I really like the graphics and the sounds on it. But one thing it seems like it's missing, and it's probably just me, I probably can't figure out the controls right, but I thought you could fire diagonally left and right, but it seems like I can only fire straight up. And a little bit later in the game, you get to climb into a tank and start attacking other tanks, which kind of reminded me of Ikari Warriors. And this was the part of the game that I enjoyed the most. But Frontline for the ColecoVision, not bad at all. If I could just figure out the diagonal shooting part, that would make it better. Now here's Gauntlet, and this is the game that made me realize that I think I was playing PAL games in NTSC mode, because you can see it's running way too fast. So I found the option to play them in PAL mode, and it seemed to run a little bit better. But Gauntlet is a pretty well-known arcade game. And yes, it does seem like I say that a lot, but I guess to me all arcade games are pretty well known. But in this case, it's true. Gauntlet is a very popular arcade game. And as you can see, the graphics and sounds are really arcade accurate. I mean, sure, there's a few concessions in the colors. My wizard here is only one color, but, you know, at least he's detailed. And the enemies are very detailed. And the scrolling is really smooth. That's nice. I really wish this game had come out back in the day. I think they might have sold a few more consoles if it had come out back then. This is a really good conversion of Gauntlet. Alright, here's a pretty simple game called Get Booty. I don't know, I guess the title just made me laugh. And all you do here is try to shoot the ships out in the ocean. Basically, you have that little indicator there on the left, and that will determine how far your cannonball is going to fly. And it also flies at an angle kind of from left to right slightly, so you can't be directly in front of your target. The graphics are kind of plain, but that's fine. It does the job. And the sounds are good, I guess, appropriate cannonball sounds. You get a little bit of music, but not too much. Overall, this is a pretty fun little game. I played it for quite a while, actually. Alright, here's a game called Ghostblaster, not Ghostbusters. And I don't know why you're thinking this is a Ghostbusters game, but it's not. As you can clearly see, it has nothing to do at all with Ghostbusters. It's more of a puzzle game where you have to go around and collect gems out of a house, and then escape the house. And you have some kind of a laser beam thing that's not a proton pack, where you can shoot the ghosts, I guess, if you can get them close enough to you. But again, it's not really part of the game. You're going after the ghosts is irrelevant, really. The graphics are okay, I guess. I like the kind of parallax scrolling in the background. You can kind of see the moon back there. And the music is kind of catchy. I mean, it seems a little familiar. I really can't place it, though, because this is obviously not a Ghostbusters game. The problem that I do have with the game, though, is that the jumping is just not right. It's very difficult to get up to those higher levels. But hey, if you're looking for a Ghostblaster game, you could do a lot worse than this one. Okay, next is Goonies, based on the movie of the same name. And in this game, you travel through a cavern and you try to save your friends, I guess, from the Fratellis. And you have to find the key to open the doors, all the while avoiding enemies and deadly dripping water. This must be a European game because they always have dripping water that hurts you. The graphics and sounds are really good in the game, and the controls are good and accurate. The music is good enough. Now, I'm not sure, but I think there's a Famicom version of this game, which is why we got Goonies 2 on the NES. But if that's the case, then I'm pretty sad that they didn't come out with an NES version of Goonies, because this is a fun game. Alright, next we have a racing game called GP World, and wow, I love this game. This is great. The graphics are really good and fast and smooth. And the sounds are good. It sounds just like a Formula 1 car. I mean, as best as a ColecoVision could do. And the control is really nice and tight. And we've even got scrolling clouds in the background. And of course, you can crash into the other cars or the signs. And when you do, you get a nice, nice big explosion, just like you'd expect from like pole position. If I had any complaints about it, it's that I wish that the gameplay screen was a little bit bigger. I mean, it's taken up by the huge map on the right and the car status on the bottom there. But this is a really good, fast, and fun racing game on the ColecoVision. Alright, here's a side-scrolling shooter called Gulkave. Kind of reminds me of Gradius or Life Force a little bit. I really like the parallax graphics there at the bottom, but besides that, the graphics are a little bit plain, especially in the enemies. You know, they're basically single color, even though your ship is multicolored. I'm not too crazy about the music here, it's a little irritating. And the sounds are okay, I guess, although the firing sound does also get a little bit annoying. Also, I wish they had more power-ups. I was able to get one a little bit later in my gameplay session here, but I wish they came up more frequently. But overall, Gulkave is a pretty good shooter for the ColecoVision. Our next game is so simple and so basic and so... It's almost like an April Fool's joke on the player. It's called Insane Pickin' Sticks 8, I guess. They make 8 of these versions of this game? I don't know, but basically all you do is move around the screen and pick up sticks. And there's a score across the top that tells you how many you picked up. But what makes the game funny is the little comment there at the top. I kept wanting to play just so that I could see what the next comment was going to be. When you get to 280 sticks, it says no life. And then, then it says, seriously no life. And it says stop playing now. And then arg. You are insane. Why torturing yourself? I dare you to collect 1,000. Well, yeah, of course I'm gonna have to collect 1,000 just to see what happens when I get that far. And it just says, impressive. And then, thanks for playing. It's like, okay, you can stop playing now. Next message at 9,001. And I was really tempted to play to 9,000, but I do have a little bit of a life, despite what the game says. But anyway, insane picking up sticks. I know it's kind of just like a joke on the player, but it's hilarious. I loved it. Alright, our next game is called JETPAC. And it's a side-scrolling shooter with some really good graphics and sounds, and the music is good too. And basically all you do is just move through this cave and shoot enemies and try not to touch either the ceiling or the floor. And it's a little bit more difficult than it sounds because you're constantly being pulled downwards and you have to, use your jetpack to, fly through this cave. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Flappy Bird, but with guns and shooting. And I don't know, I like this game better than Flappy Bird, but not too much, because honestly I wish that my character would just float there and not require me to constantly be moving up to keep him flying. If they change that one thing about the game, I would like it a lot better. Next we have Kevtris, which is a Tetris clone, obviously. And I like this game because it has a lot of options. It doesn't have much in the way of music, but it has some sound effects. And, they're appropriate to the game. Of course, Kevtris is a clone of Tetris, which is probably the most popular puzzle game in the world, so it's a good thing that there's a version on the ColecoVision. However, I do have to question how difficult it is to play this game with the original ColecoVision controller, but overall I would say this is a good version of Tetris. Yeah, that game. Next is a game called Night Lore, and this one really surprised me because it has these pseudo 3D graphics, much like a game of Solstice for the NES or Airball for the Atari 8-bit computer. And in this game you play as some character who is turning into a werewolf, I guess. Your goal is to find the bottle of wine and drink it, and then hopefully you'll never turn into a werewolf again. Well, that's the storyline I came up with because I really don't know what the true storyline is. But hey, this one looks pretty awesome. I love the pseudo 3D graphics, even though they're in monochrome, but there's not a lot to speak of when it comes to sound effects. Alright, next we have the classic arcade game Kung Fu, which most of you might know from the NES version. The character graphics are pretty good here, but the background graphics are a little lacking. All you're seeing is the ceiling and the floor. There's no actual walls or anything. But the sound effects are pretty good and the controls are pretty good. But just like any Kung Fu game, you want to make sure that the enemies do not touch you, because if they do, they will not let go. And I found the best way to get out of that is to just hit all the buttons wildly, and then I was able to break free. So yeah, this is not a bad version of Kung Fu for the ColecoVision. Alright, our next game is called Lift, and it's a pretty basic game. All you have to do is collect the flags, and that can be a little more challenging than it sounds. Graphics are pretty basic, and the sound is the same music we've heard from the other games that this developer has created. Also, it kind of looks a little bit like Mappy. It's a basic little game, but it's still pretty fun. Our next game is the incredible, amazing, awesome Mario Brothers. This version of the game is absolutely amazing. Mario looks and moves just like you would expect. The background graphics are like dead on perfect to the arcade. And the sounds are amazing as well. The only knock I have on this game is that the enemies are single color. But other than that, the graphics, the sound, the music, the gameplay, the controls, I feel like this is the best version of Mario Brothers that I have ever played. It was definitely the most fun I ever had playing a version of Mario Brothers. So the quality of this game really got me wondering, would this work on a stock ColecoVision, or do you have to have like a super game module or something like that? And if you do need some kind of an add-on, I think it's worth it. This game is great. Our next game is called Mecha 9, and it's your basic shooting game, but in this case you are playing as a giant robot. So I don't know if they were trying to go with a Musha vibe here or what, but it's got some good graphics. I like the little animated cutscene that they have at the beginning, and it has some decent sound effects and it controls well. But let me say, it does get a little bit boring because the background graphics are pretty much the same thing over and over again. I mean, I don't know how many times we can see that same dinosaur-shaped rock. I don't know if it gets any more interesting later down the road, but overall it's a pretty interesting game. Our next game is Sega's Ninja Princess, which I believe only appeared in Japan, under this title anyway. And in this game you are a ninja girl trying to protect her village, I guess? It kind of feels a little bit like Commando, but instead of bullets you're throwing swords, and later shurikens. The graphics are a little bit plain, and the sound effects are good, and the control is really good. But the one thing I don't care for is the one-hit deaths. And I guess that's something that happens in Commando and Ikari Warriors too, but for some reason it made it more frustrating in this game. I really wanted to get further into the game. But overall it's a good and fun conversion of the arcade game. Alright, next we have the classic shooting game, Operation Wolf. And dare I say, this is my favorite gun game of all time. I remember playing this in the arcades and also on the NES back in the day. Of course, the ColecoVision does not have a light gun, so you're forced to use the controller, which I can only imagine how difficult it would be to play with a genuine ColecoVision controller for this game. In Operation Wolf, your goal is to rescue as many hostages as you can by not shooting them, but shooting all the enemies, of course, which include soldiers and helicopters and tanks and boats and all kinds of stuff like that. So basically just shoot everything that moves. The graphics in this game are really incredible, especially for the ColecoVision. And I would say that the sound effects are really good too, but honestly I didn't get to hear them very much because that warning siren just kept beeping and beeping. It was really, really irritating. I wish they would just turn that off. But overall, I'd say this is a great version of Operation Wolf. Next we have Pitfall 2 Arcade, and honestly I don't know why they made this game. I just can't imagine that the arcade version of this game made any money. I've never really been a fan of this particular game, but as far as I can tell, this ColecoVision version looks and plays just like the arcade game, not like the Atari 2600 game. The graphics are detailed, but they just look weird for some reason. I mean, I just don't see Pitfall Harry wearing a hat. But the music is good anyway. Now the controls, on the other hand, are a little bit iffy, especially when you're swinging on the vine, but I think this is a pretty good conversion of the arcade game, and it's definitely better than the NES version of Super Pitfall, but I will say it can't even touch the 2600 game. Our next game is Quest of the Golden Chalice, which is a huge graphical update to the Atari 2600 version of Adventure. In the game, your goal is to retrieve the enchanted chalice and bring it back to the Gold Castle. And there's dragons and bats that will try to stop you. Not to mention the fact that it's easy to get lost in the maze, unless you know where you're going. Now, the graphics in this game are nothing short of incredible. And finally, the dragons don't look like ducks. Also like how you can swing your sword when you're fighting the dragons. That makes it a little bit more interesting. Also, the music and the sound effects are really good too. So yeah, if you've been wanting to play Adventure on your ColecoVision, well, this is definitely the game for you. Quest for the Golden Chalice. It's pretty awesome. Our next game is called Ruptus, and I really had no idea what to expect when I started this game. And it looks to be inspired by the arcade game Bosconian, and I was pleasantly surprised because Bosconian is one of my favorite games. Unfortunately though, this game is a little bit stripped down compared to Bosconian. There aren't as many enemies trying to protect the bases, but I do like the added strategy element of having to shoot the shields before you can attack the base. The graphics in the game are a little bit plain, but you know, passable. Same thing with the music, it could be a little bit better, but it controls well and it plays well, and it's a pretty decent game. Alright, next we have Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, starring Peter Strauss and Molly Ringwald. Well, I mean, that's what I was expecting anyway. Instead, we got a kind of a basic shooting game, and, you know, you just avoid the alien spaceships and shoot things as you go up. I mean, it's okay, I guess. The graphics are a little bit plain, but the sound and music is pretty decent. Hey, at least it controls well. Next we have Space Invasion, which is definitely not a Space Invaders clone. As you can see, it's nothing like Space Invaders. In the game, your goal is to protect the Earth from the invaders by shooting them as they march back and forth and then drop down and then continue to march. The only thing that would make this game better is a bottle of Shasta and an All-Rush mixtape. All kidding aside, this is a good clone of Space Invaders. It definitely looks the part, I don't know if it sounds the part. As I was playing the game, I was thinking, you know, it sure would be nice if they expanded on the Space Invaders concept just a little bit. And to my surprise, when I got to level 2, something changed. I would hit certain invaders and they would turn into double invaders. So I feel like this game has a little bit more going on than just being your basic Space Invaders clone. And I really appreciate adding some bonus elements to the game to, you know, freshen it up a bit. Next is the classic game Spelunker, and I've never really played this game too much, but I think the goal is to collect all the money and then escape. And this looks like a pretty good conversion of that original game. I mean, the graphics and the sounds look pretty good, and it controls decent enough, but I do have one major gripe about it, and it's that you seem to die with such ease. Even getting off the elevator will kill you if you don't do it right. And I don't know if that's accurate to the original game or not, but even if it was, I feel like they should have made a slight improvement with this version so that, you know, that doesn't happen. Because, I mean, who wants to play a game where you die every second, even just getting off an elevator? But hey, at least the sound effects are good and the music is somewhat tolerable. So if you like the original Spelunker, this game might be worth checking out. Alright, next is the classic arcade game Star Castle, and let me just say, I think this might be the most fun I've ever had playing Star Castle, and I think it's because I had the rapid fire turned on, so I was able to shoot with incredible speed. In this vector game, your goal is to shoot the shields and destroy another spaceship inside there. I guess the spaceship and the shields are considered the castle, but this is a fun and accurate looking version of the original arcade game. It plays just like the arcade, it looks like the arcade, and I think it sounds like the arcade too. Next game is called Txupinazo or Txupinazo or something like that. I think the T is silent, but this appears to be a cartoon version of the running of the bulls. The goal here is just to not get run over by the bulls. But the problem is there's always somebody getting in your way, trying to push you into the bulls, which is not cool. I mean, come on people, I'm trying to not get run over and you're just slowing me down. Get out of my way. But this game's got some really good cartoony graphics, but it's really the music and the sound effects that really make this game fun. They're just perfectly appropriate. So yeah, Txupinazo, Txupinazo, whatever, however you pronounce it. It was a fun game, I enjoyed this one. And here we have Wonderboy, which in some circles is better known as Adventure Island. And this looks to be a really good conversion of Wonderboy. The graphics are nice, and the sound effects are nice, and the music is nice. The scrolling is a little bit chunky, but that's okay. Also, I wish the graphics on the mallet was multicolored instead of single-colored. That doesn't hurt the gameplay at all, which is the most important thing, of course. And this game plays pretty well. Alright, well there you have it. There's some awesome ColecoVision homebrew games. Which one did you like the best? Let me know down in the comments. And with that, I thank you for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye everybody.